Yes, welcome. Thanks for having us here. Really excited to do this presentation. Partly because it's our first big one since being mask-free and coming out of COVID, and it's also my first presentation since being kicked out of Toastmasters. So hopefully bear with me. See if we can't get this done. But we have a ton of information to get to you. I want to. Our purpose for doing this is to provide you a high-level overview of what the FBI does, because I know there's a lot of myths about who we are. People think we're just a bunch of Agent Smiths, running around stealing stuff and hacking your network. But we do want to give you an idea of what the Bureau does, what our mission is, what the Cyber Division mission is, and how it trickles down to the field offices and how we develop our strategy and how we investigate cyber crimes.
Hey, how you doing, man?
I'm Agent Johnson. This is Special Agent Johnson.
Oh, how you doing?
No relation.
I'm Dwayne Robinson, LAPD. I'm in charge here.
Not anymore.
What movie? Yeah. So that is not what we do. We don't come rolling in and take over an investigation. What we do majority of the time when you do call us and we respond to a cyber incident, we're going to reach out to our state partners, our other federal partners like DHS, and we're going to basically come up with an incident response plan. How do we want to respond to this incident, and who do we need to talk to? So we're often rolling in alongside state police and our DHS partners. So if there's anything you take away from this presentation here, are these four things. Build relationships today. We're really here to provide you a point of contact. If you don't know anybody in the FBI or in Richmond, or if you're from another state, please reach out to the local field office and establish a relationship. And the reason for that is because we want to make sure that you have a point of contact so that if something does occur, or even if during the course of creating your incident response plan, that you know who to call and you can work with us, we can work with you to help you develop that plan. And hopefully, we'll be a part of that. Know your local FBI POC. That's why we're here today. Mike and I both have worked cyber crimes for majority of, I'm at 14 years, Mike's at 17?
Yeah, 17.
17 years, so we have a wealth of knowledge that we could provide you guys, just having worked these types of cyber crimes for all of our career. So have a plan. One of the biggest issues we have when we walk into a cyber incident is the lack of a plan. There are different roles. What roles does each individual have when a cyber incident occurs, and how are they mobilized to help to remediate the issue? Mike's going to talk a little bit about what we do when we're invited to assist with a cyber incident in a little bit. But again, have a plan and plan for a worst case scenario. Multiple times we have state governments, we have hospitals that are unable to treat patients, have to turn people away because they're hit with the latest ransomware variant. I think it was University of Vermont was hit at the peak of COVID, basically, and they had to take down their entire network. The medical records and medical treatment applications were all down, and it was a result. I think it was Ryuk had hit their networks. They didn't have any way to treat patients. They had to turn people away. I think they lost a total of $60 million. So definitely have a plan and plan for a worst case scenario. One of the biggest issues they had was, while the chief operating officer had to spend a ton of time trying to teach the doctors how to use paper, write records using paper. So, what does your plan look like if you were to lose access to your applications, your network? And report cyber incidents. Report them when they happen. Again, why we're here is that you have a POC if you see something, say something, and because the longer the infection is on your system, the worse it's going to get. The more people are going to start walking all over the crime scene, if you will. So, our mission is to protect the American people and defend the Constitution. So that's why I'm here. I spent 10 years as an Oracle Systems admin prior to joining the Bureau, and after multiple layoffs, I decided to apply to the Bureau. And I always had a passion and just a desire to do the right thing. And I think that's what kind of led me to that, aside from trying to avoid layoffs. But yeah, so as you can see, our mission, cyber is 2 and 3. Protect the U.S. against foreign intelligence, espionage, and cyber operations, and combat significant cyber criminal activity. But when you look at protect the U.S. from terrorist attack, what does that look like anymore? Is it really just somebody flying a plane into the World Trade Center? Or is it a lot of the recruiting that's done online and different forums, without us knowing? It's really all kind of becoming somewhat muddled, and people are using computers as a way to recruit and convert people. So Cyber Division's mission is to impose risk and consequences on cyber adversaries. We do that any number of ways. One of the things we consider is, do we have enough evidence to arrest, to indict? There are other opportunities to try to go after the infrastructure. When it comes to like ransomware, it's extremely difficult to identify actors and typically they're overseas. So, we look to indictments. We look to publicly, basically embarrass them. We do work with other foreign governments and our legal attaché's office, which I'll touch in a bit, to try to impose those consequences to extend our reach overseas. But we have, the way that the cyber works in general is we receive, our mission again is to protect and uphold the Constitution from the enterprise strategy. And it trickles down to Cyber Division strategy, which has 5 different sections. We have China, Korea, criminal, Russia, and Iran. Those are our primary threats. And each of those sections come up with a strategy as to how we want to go about investigating those countries and cyber crimes. For instance, we have in criminal, we have business email compromise is probably one of our largest threats. So we conduct investigations. Our goal is to try to get to the very top of that scam, if you will. Try to understand everybody else that's working under them. So it just creates a big tree of individuals who are responsible for opening up bank accounts to receive those proceeds and cash them out, and where are they sending money? Who's receiving those funds? So it's a matter of trying to get to the top, typically following the money, and try to conduct operations where we can identify other individuals that are involved. So where do we receive our authority? Presidential Policy Directive 41 provides FBI the primary role in investigating significant cyber activity. We're the lead investigators in cyber response. We want to investigate, attribute, and prosecute. So DHS, their lead federal agency in asset response activities, primarily for critical infrastructure. And then ODNI is the federal agency for intelligence support. If you're wondering, should you share information with us, where it's going to go, it's either going to be used, we could try to use it in a criminal investigation to try to attribute actors to a specific crime and lead toward prosecution, or it can go toward intel. A lot of you guys in this room, are part of maybe some sort of threat intelligence company. You might run your own intel company. You're seeing this stuff before we are. And so what we're hoping to do today is, hope we open up dialogue between each other so that if you do see something and you come to us and say, hey, Mike, hey, Chris, this is what we're seeing. We can check our holdings, see what's going on. If there's something happening, we can, explore it further and see how we can we'll talk about how we do our reporting and how it gets out to the private sector so you can harden your networks and hopefully prevent others from being victimized. So again, here's our roles and responsibilities. Again, DHS is primarily responsible for asset protection amongst critical infrastructure. DoD, NSA, primarily protection of infrastructure related to military, Department of Defense, and then DOJ, FBI is criminal prosecution and investigations of those crimes. So we'll work, again, we work in concert with each of those to investigate and protect against cyber crimes. So drilling down even further, that's headquarters, and that's DOJ from a high level. I want to just talk about what the FBI looks like from a field office level. We have 56 field offices and 35,000 employees. I believe a third of that are special agents.
It's about 13,000 special agents.
Yeah. So, but each squad, each cyber squad has special agents, computer scientists, data analysts. We have digital forensic examiners, intel analysts, and professional support. My squad, personally, we have only one cyber squad in Richmond. We have 7 agents, two intel analysts, data analysts, a computer scientists, and support. And so we cover the large part of 82 counties in the state. WFO, North Virginia resident agency, covers, I believe, 4 or 5
counties in Northern Virginia.
5 counties in Northern Virginia, and then Norfolk has its own piece of Virginia as well. So, Mike, you want to talk about the task force?
Yep.
Okay, right.
So a big way in which we accomplish our mission is by building a task force, right? We don't function in a bubble by ourselves. Yes, we're a large agency, but there's roughly, the way it's kind of put together, there's roughly 1 special agent for every 100,000 U.S. citizens. So there's not a lot of us. We need to leverage local assets, our other federal partners, state partners, to work these investigations. And especially cyber, right? Cyber is borderless, right? When we have a victim in Hanover County that gets hit with a business email compromise or elder scam, the person conducting that fraud is probably somewhere overseas. So the Hanover County Sheriff's Office would be hard-pressed to pursue them. But by having relationships with us, we can train them. We can give them access to those assets to be able to do things that they traditionally couldn't do as a department themselves. And we're also getting a manpower bump up because now we have local partners that we can train to help accomplish that mission. So we do the training, we provide them equipment. Some of them sit in our workspace full-time, some of them just come occasionally when they need to and work out of their home departments. But it's a way for us to really share knowledge and be a force multiplier in targeting cybercrime. As far as international presence, probably 25, 30 years ago when Louis Freeh was the FBI director, he realized back in the 90s that we needed a presence overseas. So we started establishing agents in embassies throughout the world. So I think we have 63 international offices or legats. So those are agents, sometimes multiple agents that sit in those embassies, especially the larger ones, and build relationships with our local partners there. And that's integral to cyber cases. It pays huge dividends when we have a command and control server pop up in Bulgaria. I can reach out to our guy in the embassy, and I've had instances where a week later I get a FedEx envelope and it's an image of that command and control server because they've been able to go out and get that for us. So those partnerships overseas are huge in cyber cases. Next thing we've got is the cyber action team. So back in 2006, the FBI realized, hey, we've got all this great expertise on cyber squads all over the country. And we're having a lot more major cyber incidents taking place within organizations. We need almost like a SWAT team that can go in of specialized individuals that can do that deep level dive, that differ work on networks and computer systems to find out how an intrusion occurred, what data was breached and compromised and exfilled out of the network. So the Cyber Action Team, or CAT for short, was created. It's made up of 65 agents and computer scientists from cyber squads throughout the FBI field offices, as well as cyber division at headquarters. So I'm part of the team. We're on call twice a year. We get sent out. Sometimes we have major incidences. We have multiple teams going out. Solar Winds was a good example. I think we had 8 teams out at one time at a bunch of different locations. So it's a way for us to surge very specialized expertise out to victim locations, bring equipment in, work with those organizations to figure out what happened and the extent of the data breach.
So Mike, so one of the benefits of having like a cyber action team deployment is that, you know, a lot of these guys have experienced multiple cyber incidents, and they're very familiar with the types of indicators that they can start pointing your remediation team at. So it would be, you know, help with directing you as to, you know, you might want to look in this location. This is what we see a lot, right?
Yeah, we've got a lot of specialized access to IOCs, YARA rules, things like that we can quickly deploy on a victim's network to identify something that they may not even have a clue as to where the initial point of compromise was and who might have done it. So it's a huge benefit to be able to quickly get an understanding of what's going on. So when we talk about cybercrime or cyber computer intrusions, you know, I put this graphic up there. This is something we typically use for more general audiences, but, you know, it kind of gives you the types of different actors that are doing things out there. Some of them it's purely for social concerns, like Anonymous and the LulzSec guys a few years ago. We have the typical criminals, insiders. You know, people can fall into buckets, but the big important thing for us, I always like to point out, is people don't stay in these buckets, right? Especially the nation-state actors, right? We see a lot of these guys that get extensive training capabilities, access to tools, development, things like that, and they're using it to do state-sponsored work, and their employers don't seem to care if they moonlight on the side, and maybe they're engaging in ransomware or carding activities or other things. So they're taking those skills and capabilities that they get to do one thing, and they're leveraging it to use in another area. So the data breach report from last year, still the primary motivation for computer intrusions onto networks and computer systems is, of course, financial. People want to make money. So people probably don't realize it, but half the FBI's mission is national security. Oh, that one goes forward too. So I'm going to first talk about criminal stuff. Chris is going to talk about some of the national security stuff. In the past decade or so, we've started to kind of blend a lot more, especially as we're seeing, like I said, people that are doing nation-state stuff that are also doing criminal work. We're seeing crossing in streams. Sometimes we'll see the same APT group that's doing both national security work for their country as well as criminal stuff. Let's talk about some of the cybercrime stuff that we see. Obviously, Chris mentioned it, business email compromise. That's one here in the Richmond office that we work a lot of. We've got several major investigations targeting a couple of African-based crime groups doing this. BEC is a huge problem. The new numbers that just came out last month, $43 billion reported since 2013, and that's just what's been reported. You can see the breakdown between the years. It's increasing. COVID, for whatever reason, caused a huge spike, and I think a lot of it was due to PPP loans, fake unemployment claims, but the BEC numbers really spiked. Every state's affected, 177 countries. It's pretty rampant. I put this slide in here to talk about, because everybody in this room probably knows what business email compromise is. They know how they're perpetrated. Spoofed emails, sometimes it's probably about 10% of the cases we're seeing are actual sophisticated actors using computer intrusion to get into either a victim's network or one of their vendors and then sending an email to the victim using the legitimate vendor's account. But most of these are socially engineered. But these groups are still sophisticated, right? This is not 1, 2, 3 actors. They're a business or an organization, just like a lot of the companies and organizations you guys work for, right? There's separation of duties within inside the organization. There's people who get infrastructure, hosting VPNs, registering spoof domains. You have money mule wranglers who are recruiting people off romance scams, work from home scams to be able to get bank accounts to move that money. And then you have these guys that are obtaining the target information. This is not something where they're just shooting in the dark and hoping to get lucky. These guys do their research. And I just want to put some examples up of some of the things that we're seeing these guys use to get this information. Some of the biggest ones that I've seen recently are open data portals that a lot of state, county, and local governments use to provide transparency to taxpayers, right? They want to show how their constituents' money is being spent. They publish all this information out there. Some of them are super detailed, and you can sort and quickly see, hey, who's providing IT infrastructure and services, and let's sort it by who gets paid when and how much is being spent. We also see construction company is a huge, huge sector to be targeted because there's so much money involved, right? If you're talking about universities or hospitals, They're spending tens of millions of dollars to build these massive facilities and buildings. They're super juicy targets. So here in the US, we've identified through our investigations about 5 data aggregators that collect information on construction projects. And there's a legitimate purpose for that. If you're a construction company, you want to know, hey, in the Mid-Atlantic region where I'm located, I want to build stuff. What projects are coming out for bid that I can put in for? You can pay to subscribe to these services. They're pretty expensive. The more you search, the more you pay. But that's the legitimate purpose. But we found often there's not much of a know your customer type thing that banks do for these aggregator services. If you have an email account and a credit card that works, they're going to give you access typically. So we've seen in a couple of our investigations where these guys, the BEC actors, are paying for these services, and they're going in and searching across the entire U.S. In one of the cases that we are working now, we were able to remotely search the bad actor's computer, and what we found was them using a cloud-based spreadsheet to share information. We also found information that they had subscribed to one of these services, and between 2 accounts, they'd spent over $40,000 paying for this aggregation service. They built a spreadsheet that had 30 different tabs across of it, breaking out target information. It included the construction project location, who the principal points of contact were, their names, phone numbers, fax. It included who the construction company that got awarded the job, the controller at that construction company, people in accounts payable, contact information, start and stop dates of the project, the approximate value of the project. And the tabs were clearly being given to different teams of actors to go after so that they didn't cross streams. Some of the tabs even had suggested spoof domains to register as far as to conduct the campaign. There was over 1,700 targets on that spreadsheet. And the approximate value, if they would have successfully gotten all of those, was about $350 million. So these guys do their homework. They're getting this information and they're leveraging it to build these campaigns. Some of the stuff we recommend to try and stop BEC stuff is the traditional stuff that we're pushing, right? Two-factor authentication. Specifically, obviously, I prefer the hardware. You see Google, Cloudflare spoke here last year and talked about how successful it had been in their networks for stopping all intrusions. But we're also pushing two-factor in another sense. For these business email compromises, the primary targets on the large business ones are the accounts payable teams. Yes, are we seeing some intrusion activity? I would say maybe 10% of the cases that come across my desk are an actual intrusion. Most of it's social engineering. So they're not getting credentials. But where the accounts payable departments are failing is they're not implementing good procedures. No matter how the change request comes in, they're not doing anything what they should be doing to verify. So we've been pushing two-factor on them, meaning that you have 2 layers of people who look at this and approve it, and whatever pain threshold is set for, hey, we're willing to lose maybe anything over $50,000, we're going to call and verify, or we require this two-factor, where 2 layers of management have to look through it and approve it. But the bottom line is we're pushing people in accounts payable, pick up the phone, call a pre-established number at that vendor and verify that the change is legit. And we're pushing them to not give information, right? Don't call up and give out the invoice number and the new account information. Make that vendor verify it and provide all that stuff to you. So some of the things that we've been doing to take down these groups, like Chris said, the thing that the FBI is supposed to do and do well is not one-offs. We're not just hooking guys up on the corner that are doing things. We do enterprise investigations. We identify entire networks, individuals, and we look to do takedowns. So for the past couple of years, COVID obviously slowed things down, but we've been doing coordinated campaigns. Usually about the end of each summer, we've been announcing it, where we're taking down multiple actors throughout the world, here in the US, overseas, wherever they happen to be. And we're trying to break these networks in large batches and not grabbing just one-offs. The next thing I want to talk about was ransomware, right? Ransomware is the big sexy thing that everybody talks about in the news. The numbers are still dwarfed by business email compromise, right? As devastating as ransomware can be to an organization, BEC financially is still by far the bigger hit. But ransomware is obviously a huge problem, and we're working hard to address it. Obviously, we're getting lots of complaints. Honestly, those numbers I think are ridiculously low. A lot of this doesn't get reported. I can't tell you how many times I find out after the fact that a company got hit with ransomware 6 months, a year ago, and they just didn't report it. They just either paid the ransom or stood up their network again. But last summer, Colonial Pipeline was a huge one, right? Because it started affecting everybody, not just an individual organization or local community or a county or city. It actually was affecting everybody because gas prices went up. We know how that gets headlines if it starts affecting everybody's wallet. The Department of Justice finally decided, you know what? Ransomware has risen to a higher level of threat. We're going to treat it like terrorism. We're going to give the FBI and other parts of the U.S. government more resources and authorities to target this. So this was one of the first times we were able to really take a big bite out of a ransomware incident. The RVAsec group, Colonial did pay the approximately $5 million in ransom. We were able to identify the wallet keys and pull that money back. And our DoD partners, Cybercom, NSA, were able to take action on the infrastructure and actually take down the whole RVAsec infrastructure. And that jumps to partnerships. Again, just like we talked about with the task force, our interagency partnerships are critical, not only here in the U.S. with all the different agencies that we like to work with and need to work with, but also what we call our Five Eye partners, the U.S., UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. We share information tightly with them, work closely with them on a lot of cases. And then we have the NCFTA, which is based up in Pittsburgh with a couple of LA and New York locations too, I think. But that's the National Cyber Forensic and Training Alliance. It's a nonprofit. We bring a lot of folks in. We're just one member there. A lot of these agencies up here have people that sit there, but we have most of the major banks, Visa, MasterCard, Target, just a bunch of entities that we work to share intel with on criminal fraud cases and intrusion cases. So what is the FBI doing, right? That's what everybody always asks. What are you guys doing besides just taking in information and not telling us anything? So we're trying to be better about marketing ourselves and putting out there. Obviously, because of the sensitivity investigations, grand jury, things like that, we can't just put everything out there, right? We have to control some information. We also don't want to shame victims, right? We don't want to out people that don't want their information out there, but we do try and share as much as we can about our successes and what we're doing. So a good example is the EMATET takedown last year. Our Raleigh FBI office was integral in this. Actually, an intel analyst on our squad now was in the Raleigh office. A huge part of this investigation, he actually went over to Ukraine and was part of the search and arrest that took place over there. Some of the images that got published by the Ukrainians of cash and drugs and high-end computer equipment that they were seizing, right? But again, this comes down to, this is not something the FBI is doing alone, right? We're working with foreign governments, with Europol, all these partners to do this. And it's not just other government agencies and law enforcement agencies, it's private sector partners too, like you guys, right? Microsoft has been a huge partner. They've done a lot of civil forfeiture work to take down and seize domains and infrastructure. So we have to work with everybody who has a stake in this. And you know, the internet, especially here in the US, the vast majority of the infrastructure and networks is owned by the private sector. So we rely heavily on those partnerships and the willingness of those private parties to work with us and share information so that we can do these investigations and look to take this stuff down, because we have authorities and capabilities that those individual organizations together don't have. So things that we try and do: indictments, arrests. You know, a lot of the folks we look for in cybercrime, maybe they're in Russia or China or North Korea or other places that the question comes up, why are you doing an indictment? You're never going to get these guys. Sometimes that's true, but that may make their life very difficult. If you look at somebody, say, living in Iran, if you're doing an indictment on that person, they're now not able to travel out of Iran. They are stuck in a country that's being crushed with sanctions, that has limited economic opportunities. Their hopes of potentially leaving, getting an education in the US or in Europe, they all want to work for Facebook or Google or companies like yours, right? That just went out the door because those indictments don't go away. They're out there forever. We're always going to keep looking for that person. So also we hope that that percolates out, and maybe the next group of guys are going to say, you know, maybe I don't want to do that. I don't want to get caught in this because I don't want to ruin my chances. The other thing is people like to travel, right? They like to go to the beach. They like to go to Disney World, and we're good at catching people when they travel, because a lot of times we'll indict people and we won't say anything about it until they travel somewhere, and then we'll grab them up because they'll transit through some place. that we can get a hold of them through an extradition treaty. We're also doing seizures, economic sanctions through the Office of Foreign Asset Control. State Department's jumped on recently in the past year doing rewards for justice. You're going to see some of that in what Chris is talking about. And then some examples, again, Emotet, SamSam ransomware. We're also targeting criminal ecosystems. We're regularly investigating and seizing and taking down these places that these criminals try and do business, share information, and sell stolen data. Some good examples just from the past month or two is raid forums and the SSN DOB site that was just seized a week or two ago. So those are vast treasure troves of information of not just taking the site down, but all the people that were using them too. We put this thing out. Again, I'm not going to go through this line by line because this is a lot of the stuff that you guys already know, but this is the type of information that when we're reaching out to organizations and telling them these are the types of things that we recommend you do to protect yourselves from ransomware. All the normal, typical stuff that all of us preach out there all the time, but I just wanted to share that and kind of give you guys an idea of the types of information that we're pushing out.
Thank you. So, yeah, we just want to talk about, I think we only have a couple slides left, but we just want to talk about some of the successes that we've had working with foreign partners on some of these cases here. These two guys were recently indicted for their election interference. They were actively targeting constituents, sending out threatening emails, threatening harm if they voted for a certain candidate. They were also trying to access local election facilities to try and manipulate balloting data. So, one of the things we did, we went out and embarrassed them for Iran. Again, like Mike said, indicting these guys kind of limits their ability to travel. And if they do, typically, we'll see them traveling to a friendly country that we have an extradition treaty with. So, part of the legal attaché's job is to foster, facilitate relationships with the country's local law enforcement. So, through Interpol, we send out a red notice. Should these individuals travel to, foreign country, to, let's say like UK or something like that, Interpol will flag it and let us know, and they're able to arrest, and then we work with them toward extradition. So these individuals will not be leaving Iran anytime soon, most likely. So these are the Russian FSB guys. I think in March 2022, we recently indicted these guys. These guys were responsible for hacking a nuclear facility. I'm pretty sure it was their IT network. The good thing was I think the OT was air-gapped, so they were able to preserve that. But these guys were responsible primarily for compromising that network. Again, they're in Russia, so they're going to be extremely limited depending on where they travel. The one thing with Russia is they're very much about the snatch and grab as opposed to the long term. I shouldn't say that. They're both long term and snatch and grab. They kind of look for the crime of opportunity. If they have an opportunity, they're going to try and exfil as much as they can, sell it online, try and make some money, but also position themselves for a more long-term effect. And we believe that's what they were planning on doing with the nuclear facility. These I think it was APT-41. There's two sets here, I think. APT-41 and, okay, so yeah, APT-41, these guys were primarily responsible for compromising multiple gaming and gaming software and development companies, stealing intellectual property. So we indicted these guys, and then APT-40, these guys were responsible for compromising several state networks, state and county networks. So we were able to indict those. Again, China is very much interested in intellectual property, things that they can take that would basically provide them an economic advantage. So they're very much a snatch and grab kind of state. So how to get help? Again, we're here to be your local point of contact. There's different ways to report cyber incidents, but now that we're in the room and in front of you, please reach out to us, Chris and Mike. Just reach out to our local field office and ask for us. We'd be happy to discuss what you're seeing. Again, you guys are often in front of this and seeing things as they're occurring, or even way in advance. So like I said, we have an issue with being proactive with the Bureau. We're often reacting to different types of cyber crimes. I'd rather get out in front of it, have a discussion with you, open up lines of communication so you can give us a call and say, this is what we're seeing, and we can at least respond back, or at least open up a two-way line of communication with you to further address the issue. IC3.gov is our basically 24-hour internet crime complaint center. All of the complaints that you would file through IC3 will end up being sent to FBI Richmond if it's in our area of responsibility, AOR, and it would be assigned out to an agent to take a look at. A lot of people ask, like, what's your threshold? What's the monetary threshold? Typically, for a large field office like New York typically won't open up an investigation unless it's over $1 million. For FBI Richmond, it really depends. We have a really aggressive U.S. Attorney's Office that would open up an investigation on most things. But if you're looking at like a monetary value, probably around $200,000, $300,000.
But I'll say this, even if we're not going to open a case, I always tell people, look, if you've been the victim, especially of a business email compromise, call us right away. Because the quicker you call us, the better chance that we can get your money back. I may not be able to open an investigation or not pursue it right at that moment, but I'm certainly going to do everything I can to pick up the phone. I'm going to call a contact at the bank that the money went to and do everything I can to at least get the money frozen and returned back to the victim.
Yeah, for business email compromise, the amount doesn't matter. Call us, because usually within 24 hours, there's a good opportunity that we can get those funds frozen and they can work with your bank to reverse the transaction. So we have the asset recovery team that does just that. I believe it's called Op Wellspring. They're notified by, I think, transactions or SWIFT or something like that.
Yeah, and they also monitor IC3 complaints. So when you file one and it's marked as a business email compromise, it goes to the recovery asset team. They will proactively, a couple of years ago they started doing this. Before, they would simply pass a lead to the field office and say, hey, you might want to take a look at this. Well, we get inundated with leads. It may not pop up to the top right away because there was no way to mark it with a priority. But now these guys a couple of years ago said, hey, we need to be more proactive. So they have a whole team of folks that watch for this stuff to come in. When it does, they immediately start calling the banks and trying to get the funds frozen and reaching out to the field offices to let them know, hey, this is happening. So their success rate's been great. If they've been notified within 72 hours of a BEC occurring, they've got about 85% success rate of getting the money recalled.
So, when I say, $200,000 limit or threshold, think about it as, you may be one in a number of victims. You may have lost $20,000, but there's probably 30, 40 other victims that have all been compromised by the same group. Like Mike mentioned, there's multiple individuals, there's businesses in Africa that are conducting business email compromise scams, and it's entire groups of people that are aggregating this information and targeting victims overseas. So yeah, we're just talking about the kill chain, the financial kill chain process. Again, within 72 hours, but I say 24 hours because typically there's a money mule waiting to be notified that the money's waiting for it to be cashed out, and typically what they do is they'll cash it out and then wire it overseas, or they'll send a gift card or whatever. And most of the times it's typically unwitting individuals. They're usually tricked into providing their bank account to an individual through like a romance scam, a work from home scam. They're often, it's basically a social engineering process. Do you need a subpoena before providing information? No, you don't. Typically, if you are a victim of a crime and it's your company, you can volunteer to what happened here? You can basically provide us information, consent to providing information as a victim. If need be, you can call us. We can, if you feel, if you've spoken with legal, and you feel it's feasible to give it to us, then you can provide it to us. We can always follow it up with a subpoena if need be. But what I would say to you before an incident occurs, make sure you talk to your legal teams to basically decide what you would be willing to give to a law enforcement partner in the event of a cyber incident. A lot of like I said, the more time that goes on, that we're waiting to receive information, the more issue there would be with basically treading on the crime scene.
So the vast majority of our engagement with the victim is consent, right? That's what we're functioning on. We're not getting search warrants to come into a victim and seize servers. That's not how we operate, right? So that means it's incumbent upon the organizations to look at your usage policies, your IT user agreements, and the banner warnings for employees, right? You need to work with your legal teams to make sure that there's clear statements out there that there's no reasonable expectation of privacy on company networks and devices, that the users are employees, and that information may be looked at in totality by the company and can also be shared with law enforcement if deemed appropriate and necessary. But like I said, we're functioning on consent, but that means you guys have to have things in place, because if you don't have that stuff and we come in and there's 10 workstations for different employees that we think might have been popped, we're going to have to get legal process, because those employees have a reasonable expectation of privacy unless they have otherwise agreed through the usage agreement that that's not the case.
Yeah, we had an issue a couple years ago. I think the company was a victim of business email compromise, and they wanted to wait to talk to the legal team before they provided us the account information that was affected. So by the time we actually got to contacting the bank to try and freeze those funds, the money was already gone. So, and pledge to pursue our mission, hold those responsible who are victimizing and targeting you as individuals and your companies. What types of information that we want, right? Here it is, log files. Again, it's typically we like to work by consent, and if need be, we can always get a subpoena or a search warrant for those items.
So this stuff's important though, because this is not something we're going to come in and just like the video clip, like we're in charge here, get out of your server room, we're just going to tap in and take everything. That's not how it works, right? We're going to, especially as the CAT team, we're going to want to come in and work with you guys, talk with your IT staff, understand your environment, start figuring out what looks like it's been affected, and start figuring out what we need to collect. Can we get away with just memory stuff and triage because it looks like fileless malware? If it's a ransomware case, I don't need to image terabytes worth of encrypted data, right? That's not valuable to the investigation. But we need to work closely with your IT folks and your legal folks to understand your environment and what we want to collect, and we want to be transparent about how and what we're going to do, right? We're working with you. It's not a black box thing where we're going to go in and do stuff without explaining it.
So I had a victim notification a couple weeks ago as far as like network diagrams. I walked into the director of IT and I asked him, if this threat had actually infected your network, what are we looking at? How many laptops or how many nodes do you have on your network? And he said, I have no idea. Network diagrams, know what's on your network, what could be affected, what the impact would be if you were a victim of a cyber incident. What we won't do.
So what we will not do, I always want to be clear about this, again, dispelling a lot of myths and misconceptions. The FBI and the federal government's never going to recommend a particular product or service. We get called and saying, hey, what should we buy? What firewall should I buy that's going to stop this from happening again? I'm not going to say that, right? Because the federal government can't recommend any specific product or service and say, yeah, Cisco's the one. You have to use Cisco, or you need to use Microsoft. We're never going to do that. We're also not there when we come in. We're not going to remediate your network, right? It's not my job or the FBI's job to reinstall your operating system and reconfigure your mail server. That's not what we're there for. But what we are going to do, we're going to provide you with all the information that we're finding during the investigation, right? Hopefully identifying the initial point of compromise, how they traversed across your network, what accounts got compromised, what do you need to do to recover from recover your network, but also make sure that you understand how they got in so you can keep them from getting in again. We can recommend general best practices, engage other government entities such as CISA to come in, maybe help with tabletop exercises or best practices for hardening your networks. We won't deploy tools on your network without consent. We have a lot of our own custom tools that we built. We do use some commercial stuff, but we're going to make sure you guys understand what that does and make sure you fully understand what we're trying to collect, how we're going to collect it. And a lot of times we need your assistance through a group policy or PowerShell or some other way to deploy some of these agents across the network Maybe it's only 10 we need to get because we've only identified 10 computers in a particular department. But again, we're going to work with you on that. And we're not going to exceed the consent. If you say, hey, you can go search these 10 computers in the server over here, we're not going to deploy our agent to 3,000 boxes across your network and take all this data. The other thing we're not going to do is we're not going to issue press statements. I talked about earlier, we typically don't issue press statements about a case until it's fully been adjudicated. Or, and sometimes if it's announcing indictments, again, that's typically the Department of Justice. It's not the FBI that's announcing that. We're not going to name and shame victims. A lot of legal process we write, we remove. We'll say victim organization number 1. We're not going to refer to that company in something that's eventually going to be publicly available to anybody to come to the court system and look at that. We're not out there to name and shame and rub somebody's nose in it because they got breached.
So here's some of the facilities we use to share information with private public sector. We use flashes, public industry notifications, and public service announcements. So like I said, in some of the cases where you may be seeing something might not have become a cyber threat yet, but you're kind of seeing things develop, give us a call and share those indicators with us, and we can put it out to the private sector. And again, it will only help to harden your networks, harden your facilities, and bring more awareness to potential victims. And that is our presentation. So, thank you.
Questions?
Yeah, so in the private sector, a lot of these conferences we're always talking about trust, integrity, visibility, those kind of things. With how, I'm not like to get that, how politicized the FBI has been over the last few years, what are you guys doing to bridge that gap? Because there's definitely always, I made jokes about you guys in my talk.
Yeah.
It was friendly.
Yeah. You're right. There has been a lot of politicization at the top levels and in the press, and people like to use us as like a whipping boy for both sides. And our job is to stay out of that. Yes, it's happened certainly at the higher levels, but that's why we're out here today doing this outreach. We want to show that we're not that. We are apolitical. Our job is to uphold the Constitution. Our job is to pursue bad actors and try and bring justice to those who have been done harm to them. So we're trying to show through our actions and the engagement that we're protecting that information, that we're doing the right things, that we are there to help you and be a partner and not somebody that you have to fear is going to do something that's going to harm your organization.
The other question I had is some of your proprietary tools that you guys have written, or do you guys ever look to, it's like the forensic one, not anything offensive.
Yep.
But do you guys look to open source those?
Yeah, because we've got our own internal Get, and we've been working with our legal folks on ways that we can make some of those tools publicly available, because they're not doing anything super sexy or anything. They're just been customized for what we want. Sometimes, obviously, like I said earlier, we have access to certain indicators, YAR rules, other things that we can deploy. Some of it may have obviously been garnered from classified sources. That's why we can't share that. But the tools in general are doing the typical things that a lot of these endpoint sensors and other things are doing. They're just doing it in a way that we need it to be done specific to our investigations.
Yes, sir.
With the slide you've got with the mugshots, and knowing how hard it is to attribute an action to a person, and they're in unfriendly countries, what tools do you use to know those people are the people that are doing the crimes you're talking about?
So a lot of that comes down to, I talked earlier on how over the past decade or so we've blended a lot more national security investigation tools, traditional 702, FISA, things like that, with criminal process. So some of that stuff's been blended over. Sometimes it's working with our other U.S. intelligence partners. So I can't really get into the weeds too much with that, but we are able to obtain that stuff. And I'm being told it's time to shut the fuck up and get off the stage. Yeah, nobody's guilty until they go to a court of law and it gets adjudicated. They've been charged with a crime, they've not been convicted. Thank you.
Thank you.